Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're completely rethinking what it actually means to be highly intelligent. We often have this very specific, almost cinematic picture of what a genius looks like, right? But it turns out cognitive psychology paints a radically different picture. We're going to look at the actual habits of high IQ individuals based on some really fascinating psychological research and see how their brains truly process the world.
Okay, let's dive into this. When you picture a highly intelligent person, what do you actually see? Do you imagine someone loudly dominating a room, showing off obscure facts, or maybe frantically solving equations on a glass whiteboard, like in some Hollywood movie? We definitely have this societal expectation of obvious, in-your-face brilliance, but the research tells us that real intelligence is rarely what we expect.
And there is a massive divide here between fiction and reality. We've got the stereotype, right? The loud, performative genius. But reality shows us that highly intelligent people actually display much more subtle, quiet behavioral patterns. These patterns don't always look like intelligence at first glance. Cognitive psychologists suggest that instead of being a walking encyclopedia, high intelligence is really a mechanism. It's a completely unique way the brain processes its environment.
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway from the research really comes down to this. Intelligence is less about what you know and more about how your brain processes the world. It's a processing engine, not just a storage drive for random facts. And that unique way of processing, it tends to manifest in our everyday lives through 10 surprisingly common habits. To make sense of these 10 habits, we've organized them into 3 main modes of thinking. First up is Mode 1, the inner laboratory. This mode focuses on how a highly intelligent brain operates internally when it's just dealing with itself. And that starts with habit 1, spending a lot of time alone. Now, society often mislabels this as antisocial behavior, but it's really not. Highly intelligent people are perfectly comfortable with solitude because their brains are just constantly processing ideas. Solitude actually gives the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for planning, reflection, and complex thinking, the physical space it needs to do its heavy lifting. In fact, research from the London School of Economics found that highly intelligent individuals actually tend to feel less satisfied with frequent social interaction compared to others. So hey, if you cherish your alone time, your prefrontal cortex is probably just doing some heavy lifting in its inner laboratory.
Now here's a really fun one. Habit 3, talking to yourself. It might look a little strange if you catch someone doing it, but psychologists actually have a formal term for this. It's called self-directed speech. Studies show that talking to yourself can actively improve focus and cognitive control. It literally helps the brain organize its thoughts and strengthen working memory. So if you ever see someone muttering to themselves while looking for their keys, you aren't seeing someone acting strange. You're witnessing an incredibly active cognitive system hard at work. Next up in the inner lab is habit 5. Have you ever been accused of overthinking small things? Well, on the surface, this traditional view looks like pure indecision. But the reality? It's active overthinking. An analytical brain rarely just turns off. The exact same cognitive processes used to solve massive, complex problems are now being applied to analyzing everyday conversations or minor choices. Whether they're analyzing a complex work problem or literally just trying to decide what to text back. Internally, it's not indecision at all. It's a powerful brain exploring multiple mental models all at once. Wrapping up our look at the inner laboratory, we have habit 8, late night thinking. Many high IQ individuals report being far more mentally active at night. And why is that? Well, researchers connect this directly to evolutionary psychology, which is truly fascinating. They suggest that individuals with higher cognitive flexibility adapt much more easily to non-traditional patterns, like staying awake later into the night when the rest of the world is fast asleep. It's basically the perfect distraction-free environment for that inner lab to run its experiments. Let's move to and see how this builds into our second grouping. Mode 2, the information sponge. If the inner lab is how the brain works with itself, the information sponge is how an intelligent brain absorbs and interacts with the outside world. Habit 2 is constant curiosity. Highly intelligent people use everyday questions as a mental engine. And they don't just ask profound philosophical questions either. They ask about everyday things. Why do people behave this way? Why does this system work like that? They ask these questions because their brains are naturally wired to search for patterns in absolutely everything they encounter. But what happens when they don't know the answer? Well, they just admit it. Habit 4 is being totally comfortable saying, I don't know. This is best understood by looking at the Dunning-Kruger effect.
That's the psychological tendency for less knowledgeable people to overestimate what they actually know. Highly intelligent individuals do the exact opposite. Because their brains act like sponges absorbing information, they are acutely aware of just how much complexity exists in the world. They clearly understand the limits of their own knowledge. And they absorb this complexity socially too. Habit 9 is social processing, meaning they observe far more than they speak. Instead of immediately jumping into a conversation, highly intelligent people often follow a really deliberate three-step process. First, they watch the social dynamics. Second, they analyze the emotional cues. And third, they finally respond thoughtfully. They're actively applying strong pattern recognition to human behavior before they even make their move.
Which brings us to our third and final mode, Mode 3, the flexible mind.
This mode explores cognitive adaptability and how smart brains update their understanding of the world when things change. Habit 7 is the willingness to change their minds when presented with new evidence. In psychology, this ability is deeply linked to cognitive flexibility. It means treating beliefs as flexible mental models rather than fixed identities. When new information appears, the brain simply updates the model. Changing your mind in the face of evidence isn't a sign of uncertainty at all. It's actually a key marker of advanced problem solving.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how this mental flexibility applies to habit 6, a strong sense of humor. You might not immediately equate a joke with high IQ, but humor actually requires incredibly complex cognitive processing. To understand or create humor, the brain has to recognize patterns, deliberately break expectations, and instantly connect completely unrelated ideas. Studies published in intelligence research journals have actually shown a measurable correlation between higher IQ and advanced humor processing. Who knew, right?
But here's the major challenge with all of this. Society often completely misinterprets these behaviors. We see someone spending time alone, and they seem antisocial. We hear someone asking a million everyday questions, and they seem annoying, or maybe skeptical. They change their mind, and they seem uncertain. We so frequently misread these flexible, processing-heavy behaviors as flaws. But in reality, they're clear signs of deeper, highly active thinking patterns.
That leads us directly to the ultimate culmination of all these habits, the search for meaning. Habit 10 is a constant search for meaning. High intelligence inherently comes with a deeply increased awareness of how complex society, relationships, and human behavior truly are. This inevitably leads to quiet, deep reflections about purpose, identity, and how people make sense of their lives. It's not always some dramatic philosophical crisis either. Sometimes it's just a quiet question sitting in the back of the mind. Why do we think the way we do?
Perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire psychological framework is this quote right here. At its core, intelligence is really about curiosity, a brain that keeps exploring patterns, questioning assumptions, and trying to understand the strange, fascinating puzzle of human nature. True intelligence isn't about solving equations perfectly every single time. It's about being deeply, fundamentally curious about the world around you. So I want to leave you with this question to really think about. Which of these quote-unquote quirky habits has your brain been using to process the world all along? Maybe that tendency to overthink or talk to yourself or stay up super late isn't a bad habit at all. Maybe it's just your brain's unique way of being brilliantly curious. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring those fascinating patterns.